On the afternoon of October the 12th, 2007, a man named Robert Zakansky arrived at the Vancouver International Airport in British Columbia, Canada. A construction worker and miner from Gliwice in Poland, Zakansky was immigrating to Canada to live with his mother, Zofia Zakarsky, in the city of Kamloops. Though his mother had driven to the airport to pick him up, Zakansky's flight was delayed and immigration processing took longer than expected, so that by the time he was finally released around midnight the following morning, Zofia had already driven back to Kamloops, believing her son had missed his flight. Speaking only Polish and unable to communicate with the airport staff, Zakansky grew increasingly agitated, pacing angrily about the customs clearing area, using a chair to prop open a one-way door to an adjoining public lounge, and throwing a computer and small table to the ground. Police were soon called in, and 4 Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers, constables Jerry Rundle, Bill Bentley, Quicey Millington, and Corporal Benjamin Robinson arrived at the scene. These officers ordered Zakansky to place his hands on the counter, and he initially complied. But then he proceeded to pick up a stapler, prompting Constable Millington to shoot him with a taser-conducted energy weapon. Zakansky collapsed to the floor, convulsing, whereupon the 4 officers continued to taser him as they pinned him to the ground and applied handcuffs. In total, 5 shocks were administered, and on the 5th, Zakansky went limp and became unresponsive. 15 minutes later, paramedics arrived on the scene and attempted to resuscitate Zakansky, but it was too late. His heart had been stopped by the repeated electric shocks. The death of Zakansky remains one of the most infamous and controversial cases of police brutality in Canadian history, calling into question the RCMP's force escalation tactics and the safety and ethics of using less than lethal weapons like the taser. And sadly, this incident is far from unique. Every year, dozens of people around the world are seriously injured or even killed in police confrontations involving the use of tasers. But what is a taser anyway? How do these widely deployed devices actually work? Who invented them? And just how dangerous are they? Well, let's find out as we dive into the history and engineering of one of law enforcement's most controversial tools. This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Now, if you've ever thought about creating a website, it can feel like a daunting task. Maybe you're an entrepreneur trying to stand out, or maybe you've just got something to say and need a place to share it. That's where Squarespace comes in. It's an all-in-one platform that lets you create a beautiful website, manage your brand, and even sell products all in one place. No coding required. Sounds pretty good, right? Now, if you're looking to make your site truly unique, Squarespace's design intelligence is the best. They've combined 20 plus years of design experience with AI to help you create a stunning website that's tailored to your needs. Whether you're showcasing your portfolio, starting an online store, or even sharing your favorite hobby, you're getting a website that feels like it was custom made just for you. Then the Squarespace payments. Forget the headaches of juggling third-party payment systems. With Squarespace payments, you can easily manage payments all in one place. It's super simple to get started, and they offer your customers popular payment options like Apple Pay and Klarna, making buying from you even easier. And if you're offering services or need to schedule appointments, Acuity Scheduling integrates seamlessly into your site. You can take bookings, accept payments, and send automatic reminders, all while saving time and staying organized. So what are you waiting for? Head to squarespace.com/brainfood for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, use the code BRAINFOOD to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. Thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video, and now back to today's episode. Ever since scientists like Michael Faraday discovered convenient ways to generate electricity in the early 19th century, artists and inventors have dreamed of using this powerful new form of energy as a weapon. In Jules Verne's classic 1871 science fiction novel 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, the mysterious Captain Nemo uses air rifles firing special electric bullets to hunt underwater game. To quote from the book, here Professor Aronnax says, "But it seems to me that in this semi-darkness, amid this liquid that's so dense in comparison to the atmosphere, a gunshot couldn't carry far and would prove fatal only with difficulty." Nemo responds, "On the contrary, sir, with this rifle every shot is fatal, and as soon as the animal is hit, no matter how lightly, it falls as if struck by lightning." Aronnax says, "Why?" And Nemo replies to that, "Because this rifle doesn't shoot ordinary bullets, but little glass capsules invented by the Austrian chemist Lionel Brach, and I have a considerable supply of them. These glass capsules are covered with a strip of steel and weighted with a lead base. They're genuine little Leyden jars charged with high-voltage electricity. They go off at the slightest impact, and the animal, no matter how strong, drops dead. I might add that these capsules are no bigger than number 4 shot, and the chamber of any ordinary rifle could hold 10 of them. The Leyden jar, described by Captain Nemo, was invented in 1946 by Pieter van Musschenbroek at the University of Leiden in the Netherlands. Comprising a glass jar lined with metal foil with an insulated metal chain running down the middle, it was an early form of capacitor, capable of storing up large electric charges and discharging it all at once. On January the 22nd, 1898, the New York Journal ran an article on an Austrian lion tamer named Louis Komenik, who had invented a device called the electrical subjugator to assist with his act. Quoting here, "Science has come to aid the lion tamer in subduing the wild beast. The red-hot iron will, in future, be cast aside as unnecessary and out of date. Live wires, surcharged with electricity that baffle the lion's fiercest assaults and burn and maim him badly, have taken its place. The electrical subjugator is a shield of electric wires that fasten on the back of the lion tamer and are connected with a dynamo by a wire coil. In his hand, Komemich will carry a charged metal ball on an insulated handle to be used as the red-hot iron was in former days. The dynamo is operated by an assistant outside of the cage. Should a lion show a disposition to leap on Komemech, he invites attack by deliberately turning his back to the lion and apparently encouraging the onslaught. When the beast springs, his paws come into contact with the electric shield, and he receives a shock of 1500 volts from the dynamo. Thus far, the device has worked like magic. One dose of lightning is sufficient for the average lion. Whips and even hot irons they have dared, but no animal has yet troubled Komemech after receiving into its body 1500 volts from the electric subjugator. Whenever Komemech enters the cage after an encounter with a lion that has run against the electrical subjugator, he will cower away into a corner of the cage and never need any further punishment." The quote ends. 2 weeks later, the newspaper's editorial staff received a letter from none other than mad scientist extraordinaire Nikola Tesla, and, come on, you really didn't think he would not sharpen a video on electrical weapons, did you? In the letter, Tesla expressed interest in Komemech's invention while suggesting some possible improvements because... of course he did, it was Tesla. Quoting here, "The subjugator referred to will do the work, but I think an apparatus could be designed that would be less dangerous to the man. I do not desire to be understood as giving the matter deep thought, but believe that if instead of the armored back pads, the trainer used a wand with 2 prongs at one end, better results would follow. This wand would be connected with the supply cables and could be applied to any part of the animal's body at will. Its operation would be precisely the same as the subjugator here illustrated, the 2 prongs supplying the positive and negative poles of contact found in the flattened wires. With this wand, an animal could be simply shocked, stunned, or killed as required." Quote ends. If this description sounds familiar, then yes, Tesla really did casually invent the principle of the cattle prod in a brief letter to the editor. But lest you think such nonchalant genius was par for the course, you can check out our previous video, The Many Myths Surrounding Nikola Tesla, and most everything you know about Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison is probably wrong, to learn the truth about this very over-memed and very misunderstood historical figure. The invention of the first practical electric cattle prod, or stock prod, is usually attributed to Texas cattle baron Robert J. Kleberg Jr. in the 1930s, though a similar device had been developed by cattleman Jacob Fafoglia a decade earlier. The first commercial cattle prod was created by Chicago inventor Paul D. Humes and produced by the Hot Shot Products Company of Savage, Minnesota, starting in 1939. Credited with revolutionizing the livestock handling industry, this device contained a battery, electric oscillator, and air core transformer or solenoid coil that converted the low-voltage direct current of the batteries into high-frequency, high-voltage electricity capable of delivering a painful shock while inflicting no permanent damage. At around the same time, a Berkeley, California police officer named William H. Smith invented the stun glove. Powered by a 12-volt battery, this device could deliver a painful 500-volt shock that was designed to give law enforcement a safer means of subduing subjects. However, due to the heavy batteries required and the high risk of injury to the officer using it, the stun glove was never adopted. It was not until 1964, when the Hot Shot Company patented a nightstick with electric shock means, that electroshock weapons entered widespread use with police and corrections officers. But while stun batons were meant to be more humane and less injuring than regular nightsticks and other conventional weapons, they were inevitably abused, with electric batons being infamously used against protesters during the civil rights movement and as a form of torture by military intelligence agencies. Indeed, violent clashes between police and protesters, such as the 1964 University of California, Berkeley protests, the 1968 protests at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, and the 1970 Kent State University shootings, revealed severe deficiencies in the police's arsenal of weapons. At the time, the typical sequence for escalation of force went from verbal commands to manual control, handcuffs, batons, and finally firearms. The huge gap in stopping power between batons and firearms resulted in unnecessarily large numbers of suspects being shot and killed by police. And while chemical mace, i.e. pepper spray, had recently been introduced on a large scale, this had serious limitations. Mace had a very short range, risked also affecting the officer deploying it, and could be ineffective against highly agitated suspects with high pain thresholds, especially those under the influence of drugs. The same went for electric batons, whose shocks were only designed to inflict pain. It was clear that a new type of weapon was needed to allow police to subdue dangerous suspects without having to resort to lethal force. Enter Jack Higson Cover Jr., a 47-year-old physicist and researcher for North American aviation, then working on NASA's Apollo moon landing program. Born in New York City in 1920, Cover earned a doctorate in nuclear physics at the University of Chicago, studying under legendary physicists Enrico Fermi and Edward Teller, creators of the first nuclear reactor and hydrogen bomb respectively. During and immediately after the Second World War, Cover worked as a test pilot for the US Army Air Force and the US Navy before becoming a researcher for North American Aviation, IBM, and Hughes Aircraft. He was also an amateur inventor, creating gadgets as diverse as voice-activated switches and an electric toothbrush. In the late 1960s, however, Cover became increasingly concerned about a recent rash of aircraft hijackings. While the US Federal Aviation Administration began placing armed sky marshals aboard commercial flights starting in 1962, actually subduing hijackers remained a challenge, since discharging a firearm inside an aircraft fuselage risked triggering an explosive decompression. Then, in 1967, Cover read a story about a man who was temporarily immobilized but otherwise unharmed after accidentally walking into an electric fence. Realizing that the higher amperage of the fence had likely overwhelmed and paralyzed the man's motor neurons and muscles, Cover set about creating a portable weapon that would replicate this effect, allowing criminals to be quickly and safely subdued, even inside a pressurized aircraft. After 2 years of tinkering, Cover designed a flashlight-shaped device that used a small gunpowder charge to fire 2 dart-like projectiles connected to the launcher by 5-meter-long insulated wires. When these darts embedded themselves in the target, they would deliver an incapacitating jolt of 50,000 volts. To name his invention, Cover turned to his favorite childhood books, the long-running Tom Swift series, launched in 1910 by book publisher Edward Stratemeyer and written by a stable of ghostwriters under the collective pseudonym of Victor Appleton. The series followed the adventures of the titular hero, a teenage inventor who creates all manner of outlandish devices in order to save the day, from flying submarines to more practical gadgets like a technique for making synthetic diamonds or a telephone that can send photographs. That'll never catch on. Specifically, Cover drew inspiration from the 1911 series entry Tom Swift and His Electric Rifle, or Daring Adventures in Elephant Land, in which Tom goes ivory hunting in Africa and invents a special rifle that shoots lethal bolts of electricity resembling ball lightning. And to learn more about this fascinating and mysterious natural phenomenon, please do check out our previous video, What on Earth is Ball Lightning? Initially, Cover used the initialism TSER for Tom Swift's Electric Rifle. However, as he told the Washington Post in 1976, I got tired of answering the phone TSER, so he added an A to produce the more pronounceable acronym Taser. Furthermore, the name evokes the word laser, itself an acronym for light amplification by the stimulated emission of radiation, and implied that a taser was something that tased someone, a verb that stuck. And to learn more about lasers, please do check out our previous video, Who Invented the Laser and How Do They Actually Work? In 1970, Cover founded Taser Systems Inc. in Industry City, California, to manufacture and market his invention. The first commercial taser, dubbed the Public Defender, went on sale in March 1975 for $200. That's around $1,200 in today's money. Cover promoted his invention as the first effective means of defense that does not destroy living tissue or vital organs. And while he acknowledged that the device could potentially be deadly to those with pacemakers or other heart conditions, he argued that, quote, there is no weapon, technique, or procedure for subduing attackers hijackers or restraining crowds that does not involve some risk of injury. Initially, Cover marketed the public defender to airlines and airport security for use against hijackers, but they ignored it, opting instead for baggage searchers, metal detectors, and X-ray scanners. Sky Marshals were issued with special frangible bullets that could take down a person but not penetrate the cabin of an airliner. Cover thus turned his focus to law enforcement. Yet, while the Taser neatly filled the giant gap in police officers' escalation of force spectrum, most departments were lukewarm or even downright hostile toward the device, with one lieutenant from Akron, Ohio, calling it a horrible device that should be banned from the marketplace. While other officers were more enthusiastic, only 10 of the first 1,000 Taser public defenders produced went to law enforcement, the rest being purchased by private citizens. And it was not long before some of those ended up in the hands of criminals. In 1975, a gang in Miami, Florida stole 9 tasers from a gun store and used them to rob a gas station. Later that year, a gang of robbers broke into a home in Bluebell, Pennsylvania, and used tasers to torture the owners. In the wake of such incidents, in 1976, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms, the ATF, classified the Taser public defender as a Title II weapon, putting it in the same category as machine guns, suppressors, and other highly regulated devices. This greatly restricted the number of individuals and agencies that could legally purchase tasers, threatening to put Jack Cover's company out of business. The following year, however, the ATF reclassified the Taser as an ordinary firearm, allowing it to be purchased by registered gun owners. Still, these federal regulations severely limited Taser Systems' potential customer base, and the company struggled to turn a profit. Then, in 1980, Cover was finally granted a reprieve by the Los Angeles Police Department. On January 3, 1979, a utility worker from the Southern California Gas Company was dispatched to the home of 39-year-old Eula May Love of West Athens, Los Angeles, to shut off her gas supply. Love's husband had died of sickle cell anemia 6 months before, leaving her struggling to pay her bills and support her 3 young daughters. When the worker arrived at the house, an enraged Love chased him away with a shovel. The worker called the police, who soon arrived with more workers from the gas company. Upon spotting the new arrivals, Love grabbed a kitchen knife and made to chase the workers away. When ordered to drop the knife, she refused, instead tossing the knife at the police. 2 officers, Lloyd O'Callaghan and Edward Hobson, proceeded to open fire, shooting Love 12 times and killing her instantly. While the officers were eventually cleared of wrongdoing, the incident shone a spotlight on the LAPD's excessive use of force and prompted the department to buy large numbers of tasers as a less lethal alternative to firearms. While the sale helped keep Taser Systems afloat, federal regulations still hampered their expansion. In 1993, a 73-year-old Cover was contacted by brothers Richard and Thomas Smith of Scottsdale, Arizona, who purchased his Taser patent and modified it to use a cartridge of compressed nitrogen instead of gunpowder to launch the darts. As expected, the ATF did not classify this new device as a firearm, instead designating it a conducted energy weapon, or CEW. As a result, it could be openly sold to the public without a license. Dubbed the Air Taser 34,000, the product was first offered for sale in 1994 through electronics and novelties retailer The Sharper Image. For over 30 years, the Smith brothers have claimed that their invention was inspired by the death of their friends and high school football teammates Todd Bogers and Corey Holmes in a 1991 road rage incident. In the wake of the shooting, the brothers brought their mother a handgun for self-defense, prompting them to wonder if there was a less lethal solution. However, the story has been called into question, with the families of the slain men pointing out that they were killed in 1990, not 1991, and that they were not, in fact, friends with the Smith brothers. Indeed, while Richard Smith was on the same high school football team as Bodgers and Holmes, they did not play during the same years. As Todd Bodgers' father, John Bodgers, later told Reuters, Smith ran a whole advertising campaign based on the murder of my son. He profited off that and didn't ask for permission. He's making money off of being a great liar. Indeed, Air Taser, which changed its name to Taser International Inc. in 1998 and Axon Enterprise in 2017, has been accused of all manner of unethical behavior, including doling out large gifts and bonuses to executives and their families, but that's well outside the scope of this video. Throughout the 1990s, the company released a variety of different products, including the Air Taser 34001, the first to feature the bright yellow coloring now synonymous with the Taser brand. There was also the Auto Taser, a device resembling the club, which locked onto a car's steering wheel and delivered an incapacitating shock to anyone who tried to steal the vehicle. While endorsed by the National Fraternal Order of Police, the Auto Taser was also highly controversial, with one attorney stating that, quote, "This is by far the most egregious example of a product that allows people to take the law into their own hands." But the watershed moment for Taser International came in 1999 with the release of the Advanced Taser M26, which featured a pistol-like form factor specifically designed for carry on a police officer's duty belt. More importantly, the weapon was the first to incorporate neuromuscular incapacitation, or NMI technology. Previous taser models, like stun guns and electric batons, mainly stimulated the sensory nerves and were potentially ineffective against suitably motivated or agitated individuals. NMI, by contrast, directly affects the motor nerves and muscles, temporarily paralyzing the target regardless of their motivation, strength, or pain tolerance. The M26 was an immediate hit, and by the year 2000, more than 500 law enforcement agencies across the United States had adopted the device as standard equipment for duty officers. While more advanced models have been produced since, the original M26 still provides a good model for how the taser system works. The weapon consists of two main parts: the main body containing the electronics, battery, and trigger, and a disposable cartridge containing a pair of 1.6 gram darts and thin lacquered connecting wires and a compressed nitrogen propellant cartridge. When the trigger is pulled, the nitrogen cartridge propels the darts at a speed of around 200 km per hour toward the target, the connecting wires spooling out behind them. In a commercial taser, the length of these wires is around 4.5 meters, while modern law enforcement tasers have more than 3 times that range. In early models, the wire spools were mounted to the cartridge, but this caused the darts to yaw and affected penetration. In current models, the wires deploy from spiral grooves in the rear of the darts, causing them to fly straighter. The darts themselves, which measure around a centimeter long, are extremely sharp in order to penetrate thick clothing and barbed to prevent them from being jarred loose or pulled out by the target. In order to create an effective incapacitating circuit, the barbs must land at least 100 millimeters apart, otherwise the electric pulse might only inflict pain and fail to subdue the target. For this reason, tasers are potentially ineffective at short ranges. To counter this, past models featured built-in lasers to help aim the darts, while newer models allow the shooter to fire one dart at a time to create their own spread. Because the darts may get caught in clothing and fail to directly contact with the target's skin, the taser's electronics are designed to generate a brief high-voltage pulse, generating arcs that ionize the surrounding air and allow current to flow onto the target's body. The circuit produces a peak voltage of 50,000 volts, but due to the skin's resistance, only around 1,200 volts is actually delivered to the target's body. Once contact has been established, the taser delivers a series of 100 microsecond electrical pulses with an average current of around 2 milliamperes. While this higher amperage allows the taser to stimulate the motor nerves instead of simply inflicting pain, it can also potentially affect the cardiac nerves and cause the target's heart to fibrillate or even stop. Thankfully, however, the taser uses a number of clever tricks to prevent this from happening. Firstly, the mechanical design of the taser takes advantage of the fact that the heart is surrounded by a thick shell of skeletal muscle. Electricity applied to the exterior of the body will thus tend to flow laterally along the muscle fibers and motor neurons rather than penetrate inwards toward the heart, especially at high amperages. Secondly, the circuitry of the taser is designed to exploit the difference in pulse length and amperage needed to stimulate skeletal versus cardiac muscle, a property known as chronoxy. The chronoxy of heart muscle is 30 times longer than that of skeletal muscle, while around 100 times as much current is needed to make the heart fibrillate as to make skeletal muscle contract. Thus, the taser's 100 millisecond 2 milliamp pulse waveform is able to completely paralyze the target's skeletal muscles without coming close to the amperage or pulse length required to trigger fibrillation. A possible exception would be if the target had a pre-existing condition or the two taser barbs struck very close to the heart itself. An exceedingly rare occurrence. Even so, there is still a potential problem. If the target's muscles are stimulated too powerfully, they could overstrain themselves, inflicting serious injuries. This is what happens to certain sufferers of tetanus, severe muscle spasms caused by a toxin produced by the bacterium Clostridium tetani. And to learn more about this terrifying disease, please do check out our previous video, Can You Actually Get Tetanus from Stepping on a Rusty Nail? But once again, the taser is designed to get around this. The force with which a muscle contracts is related to the frequency of the nerve impulses it receives, with the maximum rate being around 70 pulses per second. However, the taser delivers only 19 pulses per second, enough to paralyze the target's muscles, but not enough to induce dangerous contractions. Once the barbs are embedded, the shooter can pull the trigger multiple times to deliver additional jolts to the target. In addition, most current taser models allow for so-called drive stunning, in which a voltage is applied across the terminals and the terminals driven into the target's body to induce pain, as in a regular stun gun. Typically, this can be done either before or after the darts have been fired and produces a large, menacing-looking electric arc that can be used on its own for intimidation and de-escalation. Once fired, the cartridge containing the darts and nitrogen propellant must be replaced before the taser can be used again, though newer models like the Taser X3 released in 2009 feature multiple cartridges, allowing several shots to be fired in quick succession. Finally, all tasers are equipped with so-called anti-felon identification or AFID system, which, when the cartridge is fired, ejects tiny paper dots printed with the weapon's serial number. This allows every use of the weapon to be easily traced, helping to curb their theft and use by criminals. Furthermore, the timing and duration of every electric pulse is logged by the taser's internal memory for later forensic examination. Since the early 2000s, the taser has seen an extraordinary surge in adoption both domestically and worldwide. Currently, taser-conducted energy weapons are used by over 15,000 law enforcement and military organizations in over 40 countries. In the United States alone, nearly 90% of the nation's 18,000 law enforcement agencies use tasers, the weapons being carried by more than 375,000 individual officers. Meanwhile, more than 181,000 private U.S. citizens use tasers for personal defense. According to Taser International, today, Axon Enterprise, around the world, tasers are fired more than 620 times every day and have been used more than 680,000 times since their introduction in the early 90s. The widespread popularity has made Axon extremely successful, the company currently being valued at more than $19 billion. But are these devices actually effective? Well, in a word, yes. Studies have overwhelmingly shown that in the vast majority of cases, the taser does exactly what Jack Cover intended it to do: give police a less lethal means of subduing violent suspects. In a 2019 paper titled Benefits, Risks, and Myths of Taser Handheld Electrical Weapons, research led by Axon Enterprise board member Mark W. Kroll wrote that, quote, handheld conducted electrical weapons, CEWs, have been used 3.9 million times in the field in 107 countries. Those nearly 4 million discharges resulted in a 65% reduction in subject injuries versus batons, manual control, and pepper spray. End quote. Meanwhile, a 2010 study titled Injuries to Police Officers and Suspects in Police Use of Force Cases, a quasi-experimental evaluation by University of Chicago researcher Bruce G. Taylor, found that across the United States, the use of tasers reduced suspect injuries requiring medical attention by 79% over the past 2 decades. A 2008 study on the Calgary Police Service in Alberta, Canada, came to a similar conclusion, finding that a full 99.75% of shocked victims received only mild injuries. Only pepper spray was found to be safer. Yet, despite such findings, the use of tasers has not been without controversy, as a small but significant number of people have been seriously injured or even killed in incidents involving police use of CEWs. According to human rights organization Amnesty International USA, by 2018, at least 1,000 people in the United States were killed as a result of taser use by law enforcement, with 49 of those deaths occurring in 2018 alone. Many of those deaths have sparked national controversies. For example, Canada has seen not only the 2007 case we looked at earlier, but also the 2005 killing of Kevin Geldart. Geldart, 34, was an inpatient at the Moncton Hospital Psychiatric Ward in New Brunswick, where he had been admitted for struggles with bipolar disorder. Around 9 p.m. on May 5, 2005, Geldart walked out of the hospital against medical advice, claiming he was going for a cigarette. Hospital staff called the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, who soon found Geldart in a nearby bar, talking to himself in a mirror and threatening the other patrons. In attempting to subdue Geldart, police sprayed him with pepper spray and shot him multiple times with a taser, whereupon he collapsed and became unresponsive. Paramedics later pronounced him dead of cardiac arrest. During the subsequent inquest, the forensic pathologist attributed Geldart's death to a medical condition often brought up in cases of Tesla-related death: excited delirium. Described as a state of high psychomotor agitation characterized by anxiety, hallucinations, violent and erratic behavior, increased strength, and insensitivity to pain, excited delirium is often associated with severe mental illness or chronic abuse of stimulant drugs like cocaine or methamphetamine. The condition is thought to produce an elevated heart rate and blood pressure, sometimes leading to sudden cardiac or respiratory arrest under conditions of extreme stress, such as being restrained by police or shot with a taser. However, the existence of this condition is controversial, with excited delirium not appearing in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or DSM. And while the condition has been recognized by the National Association of Medical Examiners and the American College of Emergency Physicians, a 2017 investigation by Reuters discovered that 3 of the 19 members of the task force which made these decisions were paid consultants for Axon Enterprise, the manufacturer of tasers. whoops-a-daisy. Indeed, as Warren Spitz, a former chief medical examiner in Michigan, notes, for psychiatrists, this is a rare condition that occurs once in a blue moon. Now suddenly, you are seeing it all the time among medical examiners, and always police and police restraint are involved. The quote ends. For many human rights advocates, like Eric Balaban of the American Civil Liberties Union National Prison Project, excited delirium is simply a convenient cover for police brutality. To quote him, there remain many questions. Excited delirium still doesn't exist as a recognized diagnosis. It can't be found in any medical textbooks, and the AMA still doesn't recognize it as a diagnosis. Medical examiners only picked up the term to explain and whitewash excessive use of force by the police. Nonetheless, many law enforcement agencies continue to maintain that the condition is real and responsible for a large proportion of Taser-related deaths, meaning that this debate is unlikely to go away anytime soon. Yet even if excited delirium isn't real, very few Taser-related deaths can actually be attributed to the Taser's electric pulse itself. In the vast majority of cases, death or serious injury is caused by secondary factors, such as the suspect falling from elevated positions or onto hard surfaces, nearby flammable substances being ignited by the taser, or injuries sustained in the course of the suspect being restrained by police officers. In other cases, officers mistook their service weapon for their taser and accidentally shot the suspect. And even in those cases where cardiac arrest might have been induced by the taser's electric pulse, the suspect almost always suffered from a pre-existing cardiac condition or was under the influence of stimulant drugs. Indeed, according to Mark W. Kroll's 2019 paper, there are few verified instances of tasers actually causing fatal or near-fatal electrocution in a healthy person, while, quote, CW usage has an overall major complication rate resulting in serious injury of 13.1 per million field uses. Nonetheless, given this non-zero probability of death, tasers are typically classified as less lethal rather than non-lethal weapons. According to the Police Executive Research Forum, children, pregnant women, the elderly, very thin people, and those with pacemakers are particularly at risk of complications from taser use, and recommends that total exposure for any suspect should not exceed 15 seconds. But even in cases where the suspect is not killed, tasers have been condemned as an excessive and unnecessary use of police force. For instance, in September 2014, 17-year-old Bryce Masters of Kansas City, Missouri, was shot with a taser during a routine traffic stop. Masters went into cardiac arrest, and while he was eventually revived, he suffered a traumatic brain injury that continues to affect his memory and cognitive abilities. As a result, in 2016, he filed a lawsuit against Axon Enterprises and the Independence Police Department. More infamously, on November 14, 2006, fourth-year UCLA student Mustafa Tatarabinajad was handcuffed and drive-stunned 5 times by campus police for failing to produce his campus ID. Tatarabinajad, of Iranian descent, refused to show his ID because no other students had been asked to do so, and he felt he was being racially profiled. And who can forget the September 17, 2007 incident at the University of Florida when 21-year-old student Andrew Meyer was detained by police after heckling Senator John Kerry at a public forum. While being restrained and drive-stunned by 6 police officers, Meyer uttered the infamous phrase, "Don't tase me, bro," a phrase which has become an immortal, if morbid, fixture of American pop culture. American police files abound with similar cases of police using tasers on very young children or elderly people who failed to stand up when ordered to do so, or deploying them disproportionately against racial minorities. Such incidents have led critics to accuse police of being too quick and eager to deploy their tasers, arguing that the manufacturer's claims of safety lead officers to underestimate the weapon's dangers and ignore alternative de-escalation strategies. Furthermore, unlike guns or batons, tasers leave few physical marks, leading some to speculate that the weapon removed psychological barriers that would normally prevent an officer from using force. On the other hand, many law enforcement agencies argue that the chances of causing serious injuries or death are significantly lower with a taser compared to a handgun, making the use of CWs justifiable in most circumstances. As Peter Moskos, a former Baltimore police officer and professor at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, explains, so many shootings involve an inefficient taser first. They often don't work. And then what? Meanwhile, the United Nations Committee Against Torture, echoing the concerns of Amnesty International, has claimed that, quote, the committee was worried that the use of Taser X-26 weapons provoking extreme pain constituted a form of torture, and that in certain cases it could also cause death, as shown by several reliable studies and by certain cases that had happened after practical use. Yet once again, such claims may not be borne out by hard facts. As Thomas Smith, chairman of the Axon Enterprise board, argues, pepper spray goes on for hours and hours. Hitting someone with a baton breaks limbs. Shooting someone with a firearm causes permanent damage. Even punching and kicking. The intent of those tools is to inflict pain. With the Taser device, the intent is not to inflict pain. It's to end the confrontation. When it's over, it's over. But the debate rages on, with the American Civil Liberties Union currently attempting to have tasers classified as lethal weapons. The controversy surrounding tasers is inextricably bound up in a larger debate over the role and conduct of law enforcement, being less about the weapon itself than how and when it is used. In the end, the taser is merely a tool, and it is up to law enforcement agencies, governments, and the public they serve to determine how best to use it in the service of public safety. Meanwhile, Taser technology continues to advance, with Axon's latest offering, the Taser 10, featuring 10 individually deployable darts and smart circuitry capable of automatically choosing the optimal circuit path for maximum target incapacitation. In 2008, Axon introduced the X12, a modified Mossberg 500 shotgun that fires miniature tasers in the form of 12-gauge shotgun shells, remarkably similar to Captain Nemo's Laden balls in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But while the X12 offered considerably higher range and accuracy than a regular taser, the high cost of ammunition made it a commercial failure. Currently, several inventors and companies are also working on liquid tasers, effectively electrified super soakers that conduct electricity through a pair of high-pressure water streams to achieve greater ranges than conventional tasers at a lower cost than firearms-based platforms like the X12. Time will tell if or when this technology will come full circle and law enforcement will start being equipped with real-life versions of Tom Swift's electric rifle. Thank you for watching.